Hi everyone, welcome to the living room once again. Today I have Dr. Pamela Gurley with me. Hi Pamela, how are you?
Hi, I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. How's your day been?
Long. It's been a long day. Since I'm prepping for, all my book stuff and travel and it's just never a dull moment. So every day feels like a long day right now.
And yes, I would like to just hear a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Okay, so my name is Dr. Pamela Gurley. I have a doctorate in management. And so my background is very diverse. So I started my career out in behavioral health, thought that's what I wanted to do. And after about 3.5 years of doing that, I was working as a family advocacy program educator. So I was doing things like stress and anger management, crisis intervention. I was also a rape crisis advocate. So I was doing a lot of behavioral health things. And then I moved from that as an educator to I went to a training academy for the federal government, and I worked for them for 6 years. But I went to budget. So I've kind of stayed in budget for 14 years until last year, November, I resigned to 100% work for myself. So now I am 100% of the time a technical writer. And then I'm a business strategist. So I help people develop their businesses and their brands because my doctorate is in organizational development and change. That's pretty much it. I'm a speaker. I'm an author. I have 4 books released right now, 2 adult books, 2 children books. And all of them really is about, just healing, self-healing and living your best life unapologetically. And then for the kids, it's teaching kids social awareness and just even self-confidence and just getting to know the environment around them and embracing their differences. So I've really started that series a few months ago, had my first 2 books released on June 3rd, and the second ones will be released on September 3rd. And that's my Brown Girl, Brown Boy series. So I stay busy.
That's good. That's good. And I'm really interested to know a little bit more about this new series because it's from the synopsis and all that. It talks a little bit about creating self-awareness for children, right? And like self-love and, which are, I think, issues that's been overlooked, especially in children, because we sometimes don't feel like they would probably need that kind of attention. Because as for adults, sometimes we know where to get our help, but sometimes we are also very unaware of that. But even more so for children, maybe you want to just talk a little bit more about the book and what actually motivated you to write this book.
So I'll start with what motivated me to write this book or these books. It is a 10-titled, 20-book series that I'm producing. They will be in 3 different languages starting in August. I'm doing them in French, Spanish, and English. And what motivated me to write this book is that my first book, I Am Not a Stereotype, I Am Her, that was talking about my own journey and how society has a way of breaking young children. We are socialized to believe we have to fit in and be all of these things instead of just being ourselves. And so from that book, I wrote a book called Black Girl Activist, and that became an Amazon bestseller, within the first 24 hours. And that one was talking about, building a community. So the first one was about self, and just looking at the world around me and how it shaped me and what my thoughts are now, to building a community to say, I think we need to be focusing on how to make these shifts so no one else feels this way. So if you build a community of awareness, then you start to tap into and advocate for the things that our community needs. I mean, community is in Black and brown, people. And I don't know, I woke up inspired and it hit me that I'm over here speaking to adults, but all of us were once children. And so it was important for me to be able to have that for children. And so that's what I wrote my children's series about. And I find it very valuable. I wanted them to understand that representation is really less about color and it's more about cultural enrichment so that they can see themselves, Black and brown children can see themselves outside of the stereotypical things that are in books. And so I wanted to focus during the psychosocial development age on, self-awareness, self-confidence, body positivity, building friendships, looking at things out in the world and knowing that you belong there, and you belong there being yourself and loving your best self.
I think it's a really timely, season to write this kind of books, because I think with social media, right, a lot of times people kind of compare with each other. And I think for children, especially, sometimes they don't really have that kind of maturity to really understand what's real and what's not. And they always kind of have this, that they need to have this fake persona, they have to have this fake image to actually feel accepted. And it's really good to actually have something to show them that, it doesn't matter. They can be comfortable in their own skin, they can be who they are, and that needs to be cultivated and nurtured at a very young age. As an educator, right, Dr. Pamela, is that one of your, is this something that you wish to be introduced to schools around your neighborhood one of these days as well?
It's not just in my community, it's in every community. My goal is to have these books in libraries at every school, if I had anything to do with it, because I feel like the impact is greater than me. And I think that it's important for us to be pouring into our children and influencing them in a positive way, so that way they become productive citizens, but also recognize that they can be whatever they want to be and to make those decisions. Because children now, it's, back when I was young, we didn't have technology. So we're not exposed as much to all of this information. So now kids have information that influence the way they think, that influence the way they behave, that especially influence the way that they feel about themselves. So we as adults have to take some level of responsibility to not only give them this exposure, but explain what it means to them by letting them know that they don't have to subscribe or perpetuate any stereotype that's out there, and that they can just be themselves. Bullying is real, and internet bullying is awful. But a lot of that internet bullying, there's adult internet bullies that hide behind the keyboard and, have these negative strokes of words that impact young children, because children are reading them too. So I felt like when I created these books, I wanted them to have, one, something that's very tactile for them to read, but also something that's going to reinforce the proper narrative of what they should be getting at home. And so having this, if it's in the schools and if it's in their homes, then their exposure levels will change.
I think that's good. It's true, because I think some of those things, it needs to be kept on reinforcing, so that, it becomes a reality for them. I think for children itself, sometimes it's so much easier to forget what you read, and it should be a constant reminder to them, to help create that positive self-image, I would say. And saying that, right, because of the title of your book, do you feel that such issues, right, although it's common among most children, I would say, but maybe it's a little bit more higher in a minority group, I feel that it affects? Because if just say for right now, right, a regular child, right, they already come with their own set of baggage, their own set of challenges and all that. And if you add on to that they are a minority race, for example, and then and that kind of stereotype, that the stereotypes also come in, which kind of affects everything else. So that's why I just wanted to ask what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel that it's a little bit more higher, in the minority group?
Well, of course, it's a little bit higher in the minority group, because, you have people in the minority, in this community of the minority people, continually perpetuating stereotypes that kids are watching. And so if they're watching it on social media, and they are watching it on television, and they are watching it on YouTube, and they're watching it on Disney now, they're going to perpetuate those stereotypes, because they're going to see themselves in those people. And when they don't see themselves in those people, they're going to put themselves in that situation. So they're socialized to believe they have to behave this way, or they have to act this way. And of course, marginalized communities are the most impacted because they have the less resources or the least resources. And so money talks. We like to think that it does not. But if you go to these marginalized communities that are impacted with, lack of, educational tools, there's not enough funding to go around, or just with food. There are kids who literally, the only time they eat is when they are in school. That's a problem. That's just not a family problem. That's a community problem, because the community should be looking out for these kids. And so I do love that there are summer programs that when school is out, that make sure that kids still have the ability to eat in these marginalized communities. But even still, that's not all day. That's not 3 meals a day. So they might be eating 1 time a day, or trying to take it back home so that they can feed, the entire family. We need to not think that these things don't exist. And these things do affect children.
Really good to know, and that's a good point that you have made, because I think a lot of these challenges, we kind of feel like they don't exist, or we try to look away from them, but it's a real problem. And I think a lot of times some of these things don't get addressed, which really affects the mental issues of a child who's growing up, because it's really hard, and children can be very cruel, right, when they are in school. I mean, we've experienced it a lot of times. And how was your childhood like, when you were growing up?
So one, I'm a military brat, so I had the pleasure of not just growing up in one place. But what I will say is, in the home, I was able to have access to anything cultural that I want. So I got to read all of the books that I felt like I wanted to read, and watch television that, without criticism of not being Black enough. My sisters were the same way. We all kind of real similar, still have the same taste in the things that we liked when we were younger. And when I left the house, of course, in school, there was, what are you mixed with? Because my hair is curly. You can't believe you like this music. And so you get to a place as a young child to say, where do I fit in? My Black counterparts are saying I'm not Black enough. I'm surely not white. But so where do I fit? And so I feel like I was trying to force myself to be in spaces that I really didn't want to be, but I did not really have an identity. Especially back then, there was not as much on television. I mean, television didn't even you get 24-hour TV now. When I was growing up, there was not 24-hour stations. That sucker cut off. And you got to watch the little rainbow lines on the screen, or the little snow, or whatever they call it. So that's kind of how I was raised. But I really have to say, I had a very great childhood growing up. My mother was extremely influential in making sure that myself and my sisters were very grounded, and that my mom's an academic. She is all the dissertation. So I watched her go, get her bachelor's, get her master's, and then go to school for her doctorate. So I had really great influences. However, even there, I still didn't feel whole, because outside of my home, I felt like there was not an identity for me to cling to.
I think that's good, because one of the things that you have raised is because you had a very influential mother, and you can actually you saw her, and you saw her get herself educated. I think that was probably where you felt you found that there's value in education, and you kind of felt like that's important to be educated, right? Because we actually kind of follow what we see, and for children, right, who's at home, sometimes they are blessed, and they are lucky to have influential people around them, that they can look up to. What about those children, right, that they don't have a proper community, they don't have people that they can look up to as role models? I mean, or even like, for example, I would say mothers who are not very highly educated, right? What can they do in this kind of situation to make the environment a little bit more conducive and inspirational for the children?
You know what? I wish there was an easy answer to that, because the one that I would give would be a very unrealistic view, because everyone's situation is very different. in marginalized communities, there's always that lack. And so they don't have either vehicles to get places, you know, other than the school buses. Some of them can't afford after school programs. So they don't have someone that they can look up to. And if they're looking up to someone that's in the same neighborhood, it's very possible that that is not a positive influence. My hope would be that in school, while they are in school, that teachers don't just treat children like numbers or just, you know, like names, but treat them as individuals and allow those children to feel present and to feel their presence, because that really changes the shape of things, other than a teacher's just saying, oh, I have 15 kids or 50 kids in my class and I'm just grading papers. And the only ones that stand out are the bad ones. So instead of pouring into them, I'm going to discipline or treat them some kind of way. So this is why I said what I would hope would be theory. But theory and reality are two different opposite ends of the spectrum. And it really does break my heart that children lack that. And the community, I will go back to, I remember growing up and there were community centers. There were centers where, in Washington, D.C., there was always a community center somewhere where we used to be able to go and play. And, you know, so we don't really have that as much anymore. I don't really know of that many, especially with COVID, community centers that's open back up that allow kids to have a place. And then even if they have those community centers in those marginalized communities, are the staff there present pouring into the kids that are the most problematic? Because those are the ones that are not usually really, truly problematic. They're just seeking attention. They're seeking some level of validation. They want to feel loved. They want to feel needed and useful, because what they can be hearing at home is something quite the opposite. So as adults, we have to feel empowered to be more in an advocate or a mentor role for these kids.
And that's really good. I think sometimes we don't need that particular position. I mean, of course, when you talk about like teachers, they play a really important part. But I think it really comes down to every one of us who can actually do something to impact someone in our lives, maybe someone that we know personally or someone that we know through a friend or a family and all that. As long as we have that openness and we are receptive and we are open to like kind of share and impart. I think a lot of times what happens is people, of course, there are some people who are pressed in for time, but a lot of times people are just not willing to impart the knowledge, not willing to invest in someone else. And that's when, you don't see a lot of, teachers or even educators or whatever professionals they are, right? They don't invest in another person because they just don't feel that necessity, or they don't see the relevance of it. And probably that's where it should start in, like people should be made more aware, like, it's really important to invest in someone else other than yourself. And especially if you do have young children or young people that you can reach out to, that's so much more important. And I think that's why some of these videos that we are doing and all that would basically be a platform where actually we open and we share. Some people would take this into consideration and try to see what else that they can do, because this is not something that, we all have to work together and kind of do it right together, instead of like, it's not something that one person can do. Okay, and just going back on that, right, I just want to touch a little bit more about yourself as an author, right? I mean, I have come across a lot of authors and I write as well, but in terms of your journey, right, how is it like for you when you got started as an author?
I didn't plan on becoming an author. I've always been a writer. I've been a writer for as long as I can remember. I've had published poetry, but writing books have never really been my thing. I used to blog. I still do blog because as a technical writer, one of the things that I do is white label blogs and articles for several different companies. I also do media stories and whatnot because SEO is a part of branding. And so a lot of what I do is surrounding writing. And that's pretty much essentially what I created my company to do. The one thing I will say is that when I decided to become an author, it was because other people were drawn to my blogs that I was writing. And when I was doing public speaking, they would say, do you have a book? And nope, but I'm working on it. So I went ahead and pulled down all of my blogs and was putting things in perspective and just kind of filling in a lot of gaps on my life. And then I started writing other things. And I manifest this book. And of course, when you write about your personal journey and your personal experiences, oh, you think twice before you like hit that publish button and it just springs out there into the atmosphere. But I felt good about it. I knew that if I put my story out there, there could be no criticism that can come from anyone else because this is my story. I'm validated by me. I made certain decisions in my life that I'm open to living with, you know. And so my second book, I literally did in like 30 days, you know, from start to finish, Black Girl Activist, is because I strongly felt a lot of things about our community that's broken. I mean, community as in community of Black women. And I really found it to be valuable to say, it's time to change the narrative for us. It's now time to make these mental shifts and change what goes on and what is said in our community. So what resonates outside of our community is in a better light. And so that was really the starting point of my journey. And then of course it melted down to my kids' book. Now I still have 2 adult books that I'm still writing, but the kids' book have kind of slid in there. But I think once you start writing and you are pouring out stories, and I'm typically, I would say, a nonfiction writer, although my kids' book is a little bit fiction, but a little bit on the nonfiction side because it does deal with human emotions and feelings and self-awareness, but still, it's still created in a space for it to be fun. And so that was a different twist on becoming a children's book author. But I don't think I ever really saw myself as being a writer. So the transition has been embracing almost because I'm just led by my spirit to do what I feel in my spirit is telling me to do, because that's when it pours out, it hits me and I write.
And I like that you shared about, you know, in terms of like, you know, it's not something that you expect. I think a lot of times, right, you have these things in our mind that we feel like, you know, I'm good for this. I'm only good at this. But when there's when you are kind of like, when you feel in your spirit, or when you feel there's a flow to do something else, right? And when you go with it, it sometimes you might sometimes surprise yourself, like what you did, right? Writing a book in 30 days, where I feel like a lot of authors would actually find it like it's so hard. I mean, when I actually published my first book as well, I think I wrote it about in 2 weeks or 3 weeks time, and that was partly because I just had that flow for it as well. And, you know, the ideas kept coming. And once you start writing, you actually, it kind of like everything just kind of pours out, I would say. And I'm really excited to see what else that's going to happen for you in the next, in terms of the next couple of books that you have lined up and all that. But do you want to just show us like a copy of your book and just share a little bit more about the story and what the audience can expect?
Yeah, so the first one is The Brown Girl, Brown Boy, Be Social. And in a nutshell, it's, you know, my characters don't have names because I don't feel like names define who we are. But definitely it's just, you know, it's a brown boy and it's a brown girl. There are several different races. I have an Asian little boy in here. I have a white boy with red hair in my books. In my other books, I have a ton of colorful kids. Because I just want people to understand that no matter how different we look, we all have feelings and we all want to, you know, embrace those differences and have those differences accepted. So these 2 books are, you know, like it says on the back, they're exploring the world. They get to explore different people and the colors that's in the world, and then going out and playing and trying new things that's going to affiliate with being social. Being social, we often think that being social means just having lots of friends. Being social is just putting yourself out in the atmosphere, putting your energy out in that atmosphere and getting that energy back. So I talk, you know, in this book about just being brave and trying new things and just, you know, just looking at the world around you and just being excited about waking up in the morning just to be able to play. And just, you know, whenever you're getting dressed, just mix all kinds of prints. And so I'll show you one of the pages. It's nice and colorful, where, you know, just getting dressed up, and it doesn't have to look one way or the other. So I wanted to make sure that I was able to identify with what being social really looked like, so that they would understand it's not about having friends. It's about just being and loving yourself and just existing in this world and living in it and loving it. And so the girl book is, you know, the same way. So there's a boy book and a girl book.
And it's really good that you didn't use like names for your characters to define, right? Because I think what happens is a lot of times when we give our characters names, people identify by that. And I think a lot of times when you read, right, you kind of disassociate yourself in a way that, okay, this is me and that's the character. I mean, like, but if you don't have a name, it's easier for the person who's reading it to put themselves in that character's shoes. It's so much easier to identify with that, and you can see it in the different scenarios that's being played out. And I think it's easy to attract children because it's so colorful, right? And
yes.
And you also have a message to come across as well. So this is really good. And I wish you all the best as you actually launch your next couple of books as well.
This is one of the next ones. Although this is a paperback, this is not how the book looks. All of them are hardcovers, but I like to do a sample quick print for the coloring because I like to make sure that the colors and all of that stuff really looks good on the pages. But so this is one of the books for the next one so that I can kind of test coloring out and how it would look. So yes, as Brown Girl Break Barriers, and the next one is Brown Boy Break Barriers, where, you know, kids get to dream of just becoming anything and everything that they want. And they're, you know, because it's going to take that self-confidence and that self-determination to get to where you want to be. So I also put in non-traditional roles that minorities are normally seen in. So, you know, from being a judge to being a chemist to being what else do I have? You know, they have NASCAR drivers and farmers and, you know, just things that kids very seldom get to see. And I thought it was important for them to be able to see themselves in the way that our world is made, full of color and full of opportunity.
That's really good. And do you have a quote that you actually live by?
Ooh, you know what? The quote I live by is a spiritual quote that says, you know, God will never leave you where his grace will not protect you. So I live with that because no matter what happens in my life, I'm led by my faith. And I always know that good things or bad things, I'm going to be okay because God finds it, you know, me, that strong person to be able to carry whatever burden I'm given. So that kind of keeps me afloat and is a part of really how I start my day and how I end my day, grateful just to be able to have accomplished as much as I have, even when I don't see it coming. He presents things because I feel like I'm faithful, you know, and I'm obedient. So I get things that, I'm rewarded with what I'm supposed to have, because when you reap, you sow. Or when you sow, you reap, really.
That's one of my favorite quotes as well. I think it's, I use Romans 8:28, which actually says God works out all things for your good, whether it's good or bad, so that whatever situation comes my way, even if it's a very bad situation, I always believe that it would turn around for my good.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's really a powerful verse, or powerful thing that you can actually hold on to, especially like, you know, in a field like ours where anything can happen. And we are competing with so many different people. And sometimes, you know that whatever challenges comes your way, you just have to believe that, you know, it's going to turn around for your good. And that would be something that keeps you moving, that keeps you strong. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree. And I always say I never have a bad day. I might have bad moments in the day, but I never allow myself to say, oh, my God, I had such a bad day, because then we forget the blessings that were given during that day. So I'm one of those firm believers that if I just recognize in that moment that, oh, my God, this was the worst thing that could happen, there's a lesson to be learned in that negative moment.
And as we're coming to the end of the section, right, do you have anything that you would like to share with viewers out there? Or maybe especially like mothers, you know, with young children, any tips that you would like to share?
You know, what I will share is, be present for your kids, allow them to be themselves, not what you want them to be. And if you have more than one kid, all of those kids are going to be very different. So you're going to have to treat each one differently. And I have 5 nieces, 5 nephews, and 2 godkids. So and then I've raised a few in my home, from 2 months old to, almost 5. And so it's just very unique, and how to see every one of them have their own personalities. But I think when you pour into them, you really give them the ability to be creative. So that's what I would say to parents.
Thanks so much for sharing, Dr. Pamela. I mean, I enjoyed this section, and I think this book is really useful, and I think it's very practical as well, especially for parents to actually teach their children about, like, to be themselves, to be confident. And it's really good that to start it off as from a very young age, because the more secure a child is at a very young age of their identity and who they are, they don't get shaken so easily as they grow up.
Yes, validation in the home teaches validation in themselves.
And that's a really good way of putting it as well. And what we'll do is, when we're actually sharing this video, I will also share links to your website, and also the link for all your resources, so that people will know where to get your books as well.
Well, they're all on my website too. If you go, there's a section that says books, and you just click on it, and it'll take you right to get the books. And like I said, I know by August 1, they will be available in both French and Spanish, as well as English. So.
Yeah, I think that's really good, because we have multi-languages as well. So, it'd be really good. And yes, so we'll share all these links, and I do hope the viewers out there support you as well, and really share some of these books to other mothers as well. I mean, I think it's really important to get this message across, so that the young children, they can be grounded in terms of their identity. They can be like validated, and it's easier when you have something like a resource on hand, like what you have with the book, to basically kind of reinforce the idea as well.
Yeah, and there'll be 20 books coming out, 10 titles over the next 2 years after the September one. Every quarter, I plan to drop a new book.
And it's going to keep you very busy in the next couple of months.
Yeah, thankfully I work with a really great illustrator, and it's a kid's book, but a lot of stuff does go into making sure that the right words are being used that's going to be impactful. And I think it's important for me. So I'm going to do the work. I mean, thankfully I write full time, so I could definitely get these books knocked out. But I mean, I had the first 2 books done long before hand. So for the next year, by the end of this year, I'll have the next 4 written for next year. So that's the goal.
That's good. That's something to look forward to. And maybe we can probably have, I mean, I don't mind having like another section or so where you can share maybe in the later part of the quarter, what else is in store, a little bit more about the new books that are coming out as well, so that we can also share with viewers what they can do, what they can expect from you.
Yes, thank you so much. I definitely love you having me on your platform, giving my voice, an opportunity to go all the way to Singapore. I love Singapore, by the way, minus them confiscating my gum on the way there. The very first time I went, I was like, oh gosh, you can't have gum. So that was the one unique. Huh?
You can't
say what?
Gum here. Yeah.
Yeah, trust me. Yeah, I found that out because a lot of times when people fly, they chew gum for their ears. Yes. And when I was flying from Malaysia I was flying from Kuala Lumpur to Singapore, and they was like, oh, you can't have this gum. It's like, oh, this is interesting. So very cleanest country I've ever been to, and absolutely beautiful. I was at Google Singapore when I went, and then I also went to CNN in Singapore, both very beautiful places. It's actually a really beautiful island.
Thank you. And I do hope you can, once everything is like over and done with, like when we start traveling again, maybe we'll have you back again in Singapore.
Yes, definitely. I don't mind coming back to Singapore. I was there traveling for work, so I couldn't enjoy it as much as I would have liked to. But so I definitely would. It's a place that I want to go to the beaches and see what you all have for that. Have a great day.
Nice
You're starting your day.
All right.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.